Hey guys, welcome back to another Bee Swarm Simulator video. Today, I'm at the Blue Hive HQ, and there's a reason for that. I will be discussing how to get a bee swarm hive color, when you should pick one, and just overall stuff about what you should do. So, before we get into the video, I would just like to clarify that yes, a lot of my recent videos have been Tower Defense Simulator based. But of course that's not the only thing I play, it's just kind of the easiest to make good videos on. So if any of you guys have any ideas for other games, just suggest them to me, because I'd be open to suggestions. But anyways, let's get on with the video. Now, the first tip I have for picking a hive color is don't try to force yourself on an early game. So, the bubble wand and the blue Porto hive, let's say you're going blue hive, the bubble wand and the blue Porto hive might be cool. At this stage, obviously, you wouldn't have any of this other gear. They may seem appealing, and honestly, it's not an awful idea to get them. However, I wouldn't recommend it. I would instead recommend, regardless of what hive color you want to be in the future, I would recommend going with, either red Porto hive and bubble wand, or scythe and blue Porto hive. It doesn't really matter which. I guess the backpacks are a bit better than the tools, so, I guess you could sort of do it that way. And as for your hive, have a mixed hive. I don't know, this person's hive, this person's a bit, low, a bit lower than I would say the level where you'd have this gear is at. But basically, you want to have a good variety of blue, red, and, colorless bees, because of course you want to be good in every field, but the real big thing for those is the quests. So if you look at the quests, I have the black bear quest is only red, but the brown bear quest wants me to get white pollen from the cactus field, and pollen from the sunflower field. So of course white pollen, if you're specialized red or blue, that's kind of, not necessarily great. And if you're specialized white, the cactus field will be pretty tough. So basically the point I'm trying to make is, if you, and because this is of course just a repeatable quest, sure, it might take a bit longer to get, the brown bear cub buddy or whatever, but, in terms, in early and mid-game, especially, in mid-game, quests are, the name of the game. You want as many quests as possible, you want to be doing all of them, and if you have a hive color by then, not only have you made it much harder for you, just in general, you've made it harder in quests. And I would also say a similar but not quite as important point about badges. You don't necessarily need Grandmaster in every field. I don't even have Grandmaster in Coconut and Pepper, and I'm still a blue hive. But you want to get good enough badges to the point where you feel it's good enough, because if you do pick a hive color, if you pick blue, your rose badge will not be very good, and that is not something that you'd want, because the rose badge gives red field capacity, which might sound useless as a blue hive, but it all ties back into quests, because then if you've red hive capacity, it'll make the quest quite a bit easier, and in addition to that, it will give you tickets, if you do the badges, which, especially, ticket badges, I've been playing on my alt account recently. I really underestimated, like, badges are an amazing source of tickets in, like, mid-game. Because you're just getting so many so fast, and even if they're, like, cadet or hotshot giving you, like, 5 or 10 tickets, it's still really good. Especially, like, when you're trying to save for event bees and stuff. So, you really want to do the badges and the quests. So, I hope I've made it clear enough why you do not, under any circumstance, want to pick a hive color early game. Now, the question is, when do you pick a hive color? So, there's a couple answers. I don't have a strong opinion on which one's better, so I'll just discuss both of them. Now, the first and seemingly most obvious one is once you finish Spirit Bear's last quest, because realistically, by the time you finish Spirit Bear's last quest, the only quests you have left are, like, Brown Bear and, like, Black Bear repeatable quests after you got the Mythic Egg, Polar Bear, Riley Bee, Bucko Bee, Honeybee. Like, you're not gonna still have, like, On It quests left, or Science Bear quests, or Mother Bear quests left by the time you finish Spirit Bear. So, that's the first answer. However, the second answer is, I guess, a bit more interesting, because, like, while that answer would work, assuming that, like, a blue hive would be good early game, that's not necessarily the case. And the reason for that, of course, one of the reasons is your bees aren't very good and your tools aren't very good. But there's another reason, which is if you look in, like, the near my character, there's a blue star that is gaining numbers as I pop bubbles. That is called the Pop Star. And that is a Supreme Star amulet. Well, no, it's a passive from a Supreme Star amulet. Now, if you don't know what the star amulets are, basically there's this room called the Star Hall, where it's right here, and there's a ton of different star amulets that you can get depending on how many different types of gifted bees you have. So, of course, I believe there's like there's 45 bees in the game. And if you have them in gifted form, you can get bronze, silver, gold, diamond, and supreme. Obviously, these numbers being how many types you need. So if you have like 5 gifted bomber bees, you can't do this. You have to have 5 different types of gifted bees. And of course, they cost different amounts. And basically, you can spend honey to generate them. Obviously, I'm keeping my old. And they're different prices. However, well, these, of course, so the bronze, silver, gold, and diamond are, like, obviously better than the last. Like, the bronze is pretty trash, but still worth getting. The silver's a bit better, the gold's a bit better, the diamond's a bit better. But the supreme is very unique, not just because there's an ant pass behind it, but also because you get a passive. Now, this is the big thing. Because if you look at mine, it is actually a double passive, which is Pop Star and Star Shower. You don't necessarily need a double passive, especially for a blue hive, but it is highly recommended. Now, the reason you so desperately need a passive is because basically you sort of need everything to line up properly. And if you don't have the proper passive, it kind of makes the rest of your stuff much worse, because you've got all these bubbles, which obviously, if I turn on pollen text, like, these bubbles, yes, they do generate quite a bit of pollen and honey by themselves, but they're much better when they're with Pop Star. So, like, that's sort of what's so great about the Supreme Star Amulet. If you've already picked a hive color, like blue, for instance, you'll have a ton of tadpole bees, meaning that you will get a ton of frogs, meaning that you'll get a ton of bubbles, meaning that it'll make the passive work better, which in turn will make the bubbles better. So basically, it's like a cycle that helps itself. And if you don't have the passive, sure, it's nice having the frogs, but they're not nearly as good without the passive. Not to mention how OP, like Popstar, for instance, is. It's very OP because the capacity is just insane. But basically, you need the Supreme Star Amulet according to most people. I would say, because it's not necessarily cheap to pick a hive color. Like, blue is the cheapest, which is mostly why I picked it. But even blue is quite expensive. I mean, you need to be able to spare mythic bees, which of course is something, if you're like mid game, you're going to be like screaming at me. But if you're end game or like end late game, you know what I'm talking about. Like, when you've got that many royal jellies, if you cannot afford to spare a spicy bee or a vector bee or a precise bee or a tadpole bee or a buoyant bee, yeah, you can't be a hive color because it's required. I mean, you can't just have a blue hive with like vector bees and spicy bees chilling. Even though I do have a spicy bee, but that's only because it's gifted. And like, I know I should get rid of it for another time. And what I'm trying to say is, you got to be rich enough to spare the mythics, because you got to get the mythics you want. Like, if you look at my bees, I've got, like, of course, so I have one spicy, one precise. The precise isn't actually bad to keep, but the spicy probably is. 2 fuzzy, not bad to keep either. 16 buoyant, and 8 tadpole. Like, I've gotten vector bees before. I've gotten a lot more spicies, a lot more precises, and, but, I've just gotten rid of them. And if you look at it, not all those bees are gifted, so, like, I'm still working on it, but definitely a good amount of them are. And you don't need, like, a ton of gifted bees, like, gifted mythics, but you at least need a few. And I would say the requirements, I guess for the first part of the video, the requirements to even, like, get a hive color, I would say you want to complete all your Spirit Bear quests, or at least be extremely close to completing all of them. You want to have a Supreme Star Amulet with a proper color. And you want to be able to spare mythic bees pretty easily and obtain them pretty easily. Because, like, sure, you could have all bubble bees in your hive instead of tadpole bees, and it would technically be a blue hive, but it wouldn't be nearly as good. So, basically, if you are a, I guess, early or mid-game player, you would probably be, your first question would probably be, why do you have a bumblebee? Why do you have a bucko bee? If you can spare mythics, just get some tadpole and buoyant bees. And the reason is the gifted hive bonuses. Now, those are very important to any hive color, even if you don't have a hive color. What I would say, well, first of all, basic bee you want no matter what. And as a blue hive, I'm just going to be talking about the blue bees, like the ones you want for a blue hive. Though, I mean, you can probably figure out what bees you want for a red or white hive if that's what you want. And basically, it's pretty much all the blue bees. Like, even like the bumblebee, like 1.1 capacity, that's pretty good. Cool bee, that's a very good blue pollen boost. I mean, if you're blue hive. You also want the looker bee for the critical power. You want the stubborn bee, especially if you macro, or get really annoyed by tokens despawning like I do. For the token lifespan, you want the commander bee for the critical chance. You want the frosty bee, no wait, that's a blue bee, so obviously you want that. You want the music bee for the pollen from bee gathering. You want the fuzzy bee for the bomb power. You want the spicy bee for the precise bee for the super crate. You don't really need the spicy bee. And the event bees, you don't really need all of them either, but, like, I am keeping them because, I am not going to be getting rid of any of my event bees until, like, all my bees are gifted, because it's going to be a pain to get star treats. They're incredibly expensive, even no matter what level you are. And basically, but as for the ones you would want ideally, I've heard you don't really need cobalt bee, I don't know. Bear bee, I mean, yeah, that's pretty good. Festive bee, I doubt you would need it. I don't know, maybe. Gummy bee, you would probably need. Photon bee, you would probably need. Puppy bee, probably not unless you're leveling up. Tabby bee, definitely. Vicious bee, I've heard you don't, but, like, I feel like Vicious bee you would want to kill Stump Snail, but I don't know, maybe I'm missing out on something. And yeah, you definitely want Windy bee. Now, do you need all these bees to get a hive color? No. I mean, Windy bee especially is a very, very, very annoying bee to get. So you don't necessarily need it, but you should try to aim for as many of these as possible. And of course, if you have any spare slots, give them to Buoyants and Tadpoles. If you're blue. If you're red, give them to Precise and Spicy, and if you're white, give them to Vector and Fuzzy. Like, you don't need more, like, obviously, the gifted high bonuses don't stack, so, like, if I had 2 Frosty Bees, it wouldn't be plus 60% Blue Bomb Pollen. So, that is, I would say, the deal with the bees. Now, the deal with the fields, I guess. I think it goes without saying that based off your hive color, whatever field is for that is better. However, I know at least with blue hives, there's a bit of a debate between... I'm sorry that this is so focused on blue hives, but if you want to be like a red or white hive, just kind of replace all the blue stuff with red stuff. If you want to, like, if you're red hive, replace, like, blue with red. If you're white hive, replace blue with white. But I'm just most familiar with blue hives, so I don't know if I can properly speak for the other ones. But anyways, there's a bit of a debate between, like, what's better, stump or pine. I would say probably stump. Like, at least in terms of what I've done, like, I've gotten much better grinds in stump. I've gotten much more, total honey in stump. But, of course, there's the problem with the stumps now. So what I would say, because, of course, it can be a pain. And right now I'm actually quite lucky because for some reason Stump Snail isn't appearing, even though I don't have Stump Snail killed. So I basically just killed Stump Snail, so yay for me. But of course that glitch doesn't always happen, so you'll actually have to kill Stump Snail most of the time. So I would just say casually pine is better. But if you're going for big grinds, I would say you would want to do pine. Now, another thing I would say is you should save, you should not be using codes in mid-game. You should not be using grind items, or very sparingly you should be using grind items in mid-game. These items will do you much better in endgame than they would ever in mid-game. So, I would say don't waste them. If you've already wasted them, I mean, there's nothing you can really do other than, in the case of the items, get more. Obviously, in the case of the codes, there's nothing you can do at all. But I would say, I mean, that's just kind of that, and wait for new codes to come out, and don't waste them. So, as for a grind, for me, so actually, the grinds for the hive colors are quite similar. I don't use red extract in my grinds unless I'm using a purple potion or super smoothie. But if I'm using blue extract, I don't use red extract. Obviously, if you're a red hive, use red extract and not blue extract. And if you're a white hive, use neither and use a tropical drink. However, I would say at least you would want to do so for like I guess like obviously if you're just like casually grinding you don't need any items. If you're doing like a smallish grind but like one with items, I would say you want an extract of your color, whatever that may be. You want I'm not sure with glitter or field dice. Like I would say just cuz field dice are so much easier to get, it might just be worth like using field dice over and over, and they're not nearly as useful for like crafting and stuff. So I would say probably just use field dice, I guess, especially because they remove the limit until you get the field you want. And of course, use the field booster. If you're blue hive, use the blue field booster. If you're red hive, use the red field booster. And if you're white hive, use the like mountaintop field booster. And I would say you'd want to use glue 100%. You'd want to use oil 100%. You want to use enzymes 100%. Tropical drink, definitely if you're white. I'm not necessarily sure if it's a good idea if you're red or blue. But you know, you can look into that, I guess. Determine what would be the best option there. And I just realized that my coconut backpack is behind coconut crab, so that's nice. So I'll have to kill coconut crab. But anyways, the purple potion, you would do that in a slightly more intense grind. Like, not that good of a grind, but like, meh of a grind. Super smoothie, only want to use those in really good grinds. Like, if you're getting a grind with, like, a code, or with, like, a festive bean, or, like, you're planning to make a ton of honey or something, like, you'd want to use a super smoothie in those, but you don't just sparingly use super smoothies. Marshmallow bee, I mean, I would say it's obviously more useful for white hives, but I would say similar to super smoothie, just because it's so hard to get. Use it incredibly sparingly. Magic bean, obviously, it doesn't really matter as long as you plant it in the proper color, because if you're a blue hive and you plant it in the strawberry field, you'll get strawberries, but you don't need strawberries, and vice versa. Festive bean, now this is the real deal. The festive bean, in some ways, defines a really good grind, so be very sparing with those. Very sparing with festive beans. And also, I would say use them in like co-grinds only. But if you are going to use a festive bean, you should also be using like super smoothie, marshmallow bee, all that. Unless you're just wasting it, which is like something you shouldn't do. Cloud vial, I mean, they're not that hard to get, but they do have a very small limit. So I would say just use them whenever your limit's full or close to being full if you're doing like a decent enough grind. I mean, night bell, obviously not useful. I don't think I need this. Oh, balloons. Red balloon, use if you're a red hive. White balloon, use if you're a white hive. The other ones, use for good grinds. I guess that's all I can say. And I guess the planters we could get into. Okay. So the planters, just use the best planters you have. I mean, I don't really know what else I can say, like... But, I mean, yeah, if you're a red hive, use red. If you're a blue hive, use blue and all that. But, like, you know, I don't think... I feel like that's sort of stating the obvious. Like, I don't think I should have to explain planters. Now, bee quips. So, I'm a blue hive. These are the bee quips I have. Now, of course, the festive wreath and puppy antlers, not necessarily the easiest one to get. But, you know, I mean, if you have them, use them. If not, then just replace them with other good bee quips. Because I do, well, let me see which ones. So, I would probably do maybe like a toy horn and like a paper angel or something. Ooh, a paper clip. What's this? This must be something new, because I've never seen this before. It must not be a Beesmas one. Yeah, the first non-Beesmas bee quip. I didn't even realize they added those. Anyways, that's irrelevant. If you're a white hive, I would say use gumdrops. If not, I don't think there's a purpose. Oh, dice. So, like I was talking about field dice a bit earlier. If you're in a good grind, use loaded dice. That's just something you have to do no matter. Like, it's like if you're doing a really good grind and you're not using loaded dice, it's not a really good grind unless you have like another boost from like a code or like a field booster or something that adds up to ×4. But if you don't have a ×4 boost in a grind where you're using like a festive bean and a super smoothie and all that, you should. So, yeah. And then I would say aside from that, I guess we could get into the amulets. Now, like I said, don't pick a hive color early on. So just get normal amulets early on. But later on, of course, you'll want to specialize your amulets based on the hive color. Now, of course, I already talked about the Supreme Star Amulet. However, the Supreme Shell Amulet, I mean, the goo's probably really useful if you're white. And I can definitely say that the stump is very useful as a blue hive. Of course, with the Supreme Shell Amulet, it's quite hard to get. So, like, just if you have a diamond shell, get a diamond shell. If you have a gold shell, get a gold shell, etc. But don't replace, like, a diamond shell with a gold shell unless it's, like, a really bad diamond or, like, a really good gold or something. But overall, it's not a great idea. Stick bug, pretty straightforward. Honey from tokens if you're, like, a white hive, definitely. Blue pollen if you're a blue hive, all that. As far as, so, I don't know. I'm not, like, just to clarify, I'm not, like, super, super good. Like, I'm not, like, on the leaderboard or anything. So, I'm not going to get into the super, super endgame things. But I will mention this, which is, people have been talking about, like, basically what's, like, good enough, like, Supreme Amulet. My Supreme Star Amulet has Pop Star and Star Shower, and that is more than good enough for me. And it has blue pollen. So I would basically consider that like a perfect amulet. But if you were to ask most like endgame people, they would say like 2.5. They always say 2.5 out of 5. I don't know why. They probably say this one's a 2 though, because they usually say that to better ones than this. But basically, if you're picking between like let's say you're a blue hive. If you're picking between like Pop Star and like blue pollen, go with Pop Star. Like, of course, the double passive. If you have a double passive and you haven't already picked a hive color, you should pick a hive color based on that, to be honest. But like the double passive is very good. But I mean, don't necessarily, like, if your hive is already like blue and like it's hard to change it, don't change it just because you get a good red double passive, unless again you're still like developing and you haven't necessarily gotten like all these gifted mythics and stuff, in which case I would say to change. But basically I would say that overall, what you want to do is you want to get like the passive top priority. And if you can get the correct pollen color and all that other stuff, like, cool. But it's certainly not required to become that hive color. And then I would say for the Moon Amulet, Ant Amulet, and King Beetle Amulet, it's, I guess, kind of straightforward. King Beetle, the fields you want, and the other two, the pollen you want. Pretty much. And then, I guess for the gear, boots, you always want gummy boots no matter what. Belt, you always want that weird star belt. Pedal belt, you always want the pedal belt no matter what. Shoulder pads, you always want crimson and cobalt no matter what. And then, I guess, mask depends on your hive color. Don't waste your diamond eggs. Don't waste your glue. Don't waste your stingers. Backpack depends on your color. And, no, wait a minute. It does not depend on your color. You want to use the coconut backpack. You do not want to be using the Porto hive. There we go. Much better. Okay. And the, wand, of course, I'm using the petal wand still, but of course, if you have the Tide Popper, Dark Scythe, or Gummy Baller, those are better. For their respective hive colors, at least. So, like, I'm working toward the Tide Popper. If you do have the Tide Popper and you're a blue hive, better. But yeah, I mean, I would say that is the tips about different color hives. If you have anything to say in the comments, put them in the comments. If I haven't said something, I don't know, Google it. And if you like my channel, subscribe. Starcat Meows out.